Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel and we'll be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, the bottom line in the Mechaber, by the words Ve'ein Ma'arvin all the way at the end of the line, Siman Reish Samach Aleph Sif Aleph, in the middle of Sif Aleph here. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzara L'Revacha Me'afela L'Oira U'Mishiber L'Geula Hashta B'Gala U'Bizman Kariv V'Noimar Amen. So, here in Siman Reish Samach Aleph so far, we've been discussing the time of Bein Hashmashis, and we're discussing what's mutter and what's asur to be done during Bein Hashmashis. Now let's remind ourselves. The time of Bein Hashmashis is Safek Yom Safek Laila. During this time period, we don't know, is it still day, is it still Erev Shabbos, or is it already Laila, and is it already Shabbos? Now, when we have such a Safek in Halacha, what are the rules that we usually apply? So we know, Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, Safek Darabanan L'Kula. When we're dealing with a Safek on an Issa Daraisa, something that's Asur min HaTorah, we say that you have to go L'Chumra. When we're dealing with a Safek on an Issa Darabanan, so normally we say Sveika Darabanan, we go L'Kula. Yet, that's not the fact when it comes to Bein Hashmashis on Erev Shabbos. And Pashtus, the reason for that is because when Chazal went ahead and made Isurei Darabanan on Shabbos, what they did was they said, any time period that has a din of Shabbos, these Isurei Darabanan apply. So, Bein Hashmashis, because Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, Bein Hashmashis, we're going to treat Bein Hashmashis L'Chumra, we're going to treat it as being Shabbos. Once we treat it as being Shabbos, all of the Isurei Darabanan of Shabbos already kick in. So the general rule of Safek Darabanan L'Kula does not apply when it comes to Isurei Darabanan on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashis. Okay, so now, having said that, we have Siman Reish Samach Aleph over here, where the Mechaber started off, and the Mechaber told us certain things that are Asur Darabanan that you're not allowed to do Bein Hashmashis. So he said over here, Ein Ma'asrin es Havadai. You're not allowed to separate Trumas Maisris from something that's Tevel Vadai. We have produce that you know for sure Trumas and Maisris have not been separated. You're not allowed to go ahead and be mafresh those Trumas and Maisris on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashis. The reason is because this would be an Issa D'Rabbanan. Why would it be an Issa D'Rabbanan? Because when you're mafresh Trumas and Maisris, you're misakin the food. You're repairing the food. Before it was Asur La'achila, now it's Mutter Ba'achila. It's a Merzi Kitikun Moneh. It looks like as if you're repairing a Keli, which would be Asur on Shabbos. So there's an Issa D'Rabbanan to be mafresh Trumas and Maisris. Okay, since it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, that Issa D'Rabbanan applies even during Bein Hashmashis. The reason the Mechaber had to tell it to me over here is because he had to tell me that this is Asur D'Rabbanan because it looks like Tikkun Moneh. The Mechaber said next, Ein matbilin es hakelim. You're not allowed to be toivel a keli. We said that negeya to us, this means if you purchase a new keli from an Ein Yehudi, it requires tefillah. There's a sheet that you're not allowed to do tefillas kalim on Shabbos. So this is also an Issa D'Rabbanan because it looks like Tikkun Moneh. Since it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, you're not allowed to do it Bein Hashmashis. The last one that we have over here in the Mechaber, all the way at the end of the line here, bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch, is Ve'ein Ma'arvin Eruvei Tchumen. You're not allowed to make an Eruv Tchumen on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashis. Now, just a drop of background over here. We know that on Shabbos there's an Isser Tchumen. What's the Isser of Tchum on Shabbos? You're not allowed to go 2,000 amas, more than 2,000 amas, beyond the place where you are Kaine Shvisa on Erev Shabbos. What does that mean? Well, on Erev Shabbos, Bein Hashmashis, when Shabbos comes in, you are located in a certain locale. That's where you are Kaine Shvisa. That is your living spot, so to speak, for Shabbos. You're not allowed to travel more than 2,000 amas beyond that area. So wherever you are, you're not allowed to go more than 2,000 amas away. Now, it's not that simple, because if you're inside a city, you have the entire city. The entire city is considered your Dalet Amas. So you're kind of shvisa in the entire city, but you're not allowed to go more than 2,000 amas beyond the city limits. So this is basically the Isser of Tchumen. Now, having said that, there is a mechanism that allows you to go more than 2,000 amas beyond what would have been your Tchum. What is that mechanism? It's Iruvei Tchumen. How does it work? So let's say you're in a city. Now, you only have 2,000 amas beyond the city limits, but you want to be able to go 4,000 amas beyond the city limits. What you could do is, there's a mechanism that allows you to be kind of shvisa 2,000 amas beyond the city limits, and now you're able to go 2,000 amas back to the city, and once you're in the city, you have the whole city, but you're also allowed to go 2,000 amas away from that spot where you were kind of shvisa in any direction. How do you do this? You make an Erev Tchumen. What's an Erev Tchumen? Very high level, because we're not learning Chelik Daled now. We're not learning the halachas of Iruvei Tchumen, but very high level, what you do is you take mazayin shtei seudais, you take enough food that would hold you for 2 meals, you set it up, you put it in a place 2,000 amas away, and now it's as if you were kind of shvisa over there. So Erev Shabbos, you go to this place 2,000 amas away, you set up your Erev Tchumen, and then you go back home. When Bein Hashmashos comes, when Shabbos kicks in, we look at it as if you weren't kind of shvisa inside your city. No, you were kind of shvisa where the Erev Tchumen is. Now, because you were kind of shvisa over there, like I said, you have 2,000 amas back to the city, and once you're in the city, you have the entire city. But now you also gained another 2,000 amas from that point where the Erev Tchumen is. You gained another 2,000 amas from there. Now, basic rules of Erev Tchumen are, you're not allowed to make an Erev Tchumen unless you're doing it for a Dvar Mitzvah. So, for example, somebody's in a city and there's a hospital that's located outside the Tchum of the city, and he wants to be able to go visit a sick person in the hospital on Shabbos. Without Iruvei Tchumen, he wouldn't be able to go to the hospital. Let's say the hospital is 3,000 amas beyond the city limits. He wouldn't be allowed to go to the hospital on Shabbos. He would have to go out of the Tchum. So what do? You set up an Iruvei Tchumen at an appropriate point in an appropriate place outside of the city limits, and now you have another 2,000 amas from that point on. Now you could go be B'kaim the mitzvah of Bika Chaylim, and you could go beyond what your normal Tchum would be. So this is the Isser Tchumen. This is the mechanism of Iruvei Tchumen. And again, generally speaking, you're only allowed to make an Iruvei Tchumen for a Dvar Mitzvah. You're not allowed to make an Iruvei Tchumen for a Dvar Rishus. You just want to be able to go on a Spazier outside of your normal Tchum. You're not allowed to make Iruvei Tchumen. And again, this is high level. We're going to see an exception to this. You're not allowed to make Iruvei Tchumen for a Dvar Rishus. Says the Mechaber over here, Nagel in Yonenu, the Mechaber says, on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos, Ein Ma'arvin Iruvei Tchumen. You're not allowed to make Iruvei Tchumen Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. What's the reason for this? So let's dive into the Mishnah Berurah here. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Zion that begins on the very bottom line of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ve'ein Ma'arvin Iruvei Tchumen. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, De begemara yesh smach le'iruvei tchumen mikra. We have at least an asmachta to the Isser of Tchumen in a pasuk, and this is brought down in the Gemara Eruvin Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, and that's why you can't make Iruvei Tchumen Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. What's the Mishnah Berurah saying? Well, here's the Mishnah Berurah's problem. We know that Iruvei Chatzeros you are allowed to make Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. So the question is, what's the difference between Iruvei Chatzeros and Iruvei Tchumen? What are Iruvei Chatzeros? So you have a lot of different houses that open up onto a common courtyard. There's an Issa D'Rabbanan that says you're not allowed to carry from the common courtyard into the houses or from the houses into the common courtyard. This is true even though the houses are all Rishus HaYachid and the Chotzer is also Rishus HaYachid. So really, what's the problem? You're carrying from the house, which is Rishus HaYachid, to the Chotzer, which is also Rishus HaYachid, or from the Chotzer that's Rishus HaYachid to the house that's also Rishus HaYachid. There's no Isser of Haitzah. The Isser of Haitzah the Isser, what we call colloquially carrying, you're not allowed to take something from one type of Rishus to another. So you can't go from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, or from a Rishus HaRabim to a Rishus HaYachid. But Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid, what's the problem? The answer is that what Chazal said was, when you have a lot of different houses that open up onto a common courtyard, it feels like you're transferring from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. Because the house, we understand, is a Rishus HaYachid. The house belongs to one family. It belongs to one person. That's a private residence. It's a Rishus HaYachid. The courtyard is a common courtyard. It's serving 10 different houses. So that feels like a Rishus HaRabim. And if we're going to allow you to transfer to and from the houses to the common courtyard to the houses, that's going to lead to somebody making a mistake and end up transferring from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, or vice versa. So Chazal answered that. Having said that, they created a mechanism whereby it becomes mutter. What's that mechanism? Eruve Chatzeros. How does Eruve Chatzeros work? All of the different people who live in this common courtyard, all of the households in the common courtyard, they chip in to a certain amount of food. That food is put into one of the houses in the Chotzer, and now it's as if everybody lives in that house, and it's as if the Chotzer, instead of the Chotzer serving a lot of individual, independent Rishus HaYachids, now it's as if the Chotzer is serving one unified Rishus HaYachid, and through this mechanism, Chazal were matir their Isser D'Rabbanan to transfer to and from the houses and the common courtyard. So that's Eruve Chatzeros. Now the halacha is, Eruve Chatzeros, you're allowed to make Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. Now, the whole problem of not making Eruve Tchumen on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes is the same thing as taking Meiser, and the same thing as doing Tfilas Kelim. What's the problem? It's similar to Tikkun Moneh. It looks like you're repairing something. How you're repairing something? Well, until now, you had an Isser, you weren't allowed to go beyond the Tchum. Now, by making this mechanism of Eruve Tchumen, suddenly you are allowed to go outside the Tchum. So it's a kind of a Tikkun. Since it's a kind of a Tikkun, Chazal asered it, and they even they made an Isser D'Rabbanan, and now it becomes Aser Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. But the problem again is, what's the nafkamina between that and Eruve Chatzeros? Eruve Chatzeros, you could apply the same logic. Until now, it was Aser to transfer something to or from the common courtyard and the private residences that are in the Chotzer, and yet that you're allowed to do Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. We don't say it looks like a tikkun and we don't aser it. By Eruve Tchumen, we say it looks like a tikkun and we aser it. This is what the Mishnah Berurah is coming to answer. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the answer is the Gemara yesh smachli Eruve Tchumen mikra. Since the Isser of Tchumen is based on a pasuk, this is a much higher level tikkun, because we have an Isser that you're not allowed to go beyond your Tchum that actually has a smach in a pasuk. So it's a real heavy-duty Isser. And now, by using the mechanism of Eruve Tchumen, you're making a heavy-duty, significant tikkun. And that's why Chazal asered it, and that's why it's aser even Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. Eruve Chatzeros is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. It doesn't have a smach in the pasuk. Since it doesn't have a smach in the pasuk, we don't look at it as being such a significant tikkun. And to make Eruve Chatzeros Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes is mutter, but to make Eruve Tchumen Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes is aser. Then the Mishnah Berurah points out another interesting thing. I told you that really the mechanism of Eruve Tchumen is only mutter when it's a tzarich mitzvah. You're only allowed to make Eruve Tchumen if you have to do Pika Chaylim, if you want to go listen to a shir, you want to go to the Beis Medrash and learn with your Chavrusa on Shabbos, and you have to go outside the Tchum, then you're allowed to make Eruve Tchumen. But for a Dvar Rishus, we don't let you make Eruve Tchumen. Now, when the Mechaber says over here that you're allowed to make Eruve Tchumen on, when the Mechaber says here that you're not allowed to make Eruve Tchumen on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes, he must be talking about a case of Dvar Mitzvah. Because if it's a Dvar Rishus, you're not allowed to do it anyway. If it's a Dvar Rishus, you're not even allowed to do it on Erev Shabbos. So if we're talking about somebody who wants to make Eruve Tchumen to go for a spatzir, there's no reason for the Mechaber to tell me that that's Aser Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. That's Aser Erev Shabbos at 11 o'clock in the morning. So if the Mechaber is telling me that it's Aser Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, he must be talking about a case where you want to make your Ruvei Tchumin for a Dvar Mitzvah. Since you want to do it for a Dvar Mitzvah, normally it would be Mutter. But now that it's Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, now it's Aser. But the Mishnah Berurah is bothered. I don't understand. Usually, when you have a Shvus, when you have an Isser D'Rabbanan, and it's Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, so we said at the beginning of this year, Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, anything that's Aser B'D'Rabbanan is Aser. But there's a great exemption. That exception is if it's for a Dvar Mitzvah. Normally, if you have something that's Aser B'D'Rabbanan, and now it's Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, and you want to do it for a Tzarech Mitzvah, then it becomes Mutter. So I don't understand. If we're talking over here about making Eruvei Tchumin, Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, you're only allowed to make Eruvei Tchumin for a Dvar Mitzvah. And if it's for a Tzarech Mitzvah, it should be Mutter. Why is it Aser? Explains the Mishnah Berurah. He says, V'al kein chomer da'afilu l'Dvar Mitzvah Aser. The same answer. Why does it nafkamina between a Ruvei Chatzeros and a Ruvei Tchumin, which is because it's closer to a Deraisa, it has a smach in the Kra, that also answers why it's even Aser l'Tzarech Mitzvah. Normally, we would be matir a Shvus, Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos l'Tzarech Mitzvah. But by a Ruvei Tchumin, we're not going to. Again, because it's more chamor, because it has a smach in the Kra. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says in his second line here, Val kein chomer da'afilu l'Dvar Mitzvah Aser. Kein kasav ha'oila Shabbos, that's what the Oila Shabbos says. But there's a dissenting opinion. Uba Lavush make a l'Dvar Mitzvah. But the Lavush says, no, you want to make Eruvei Tchumin Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos? Well, that's only in the Siddur Rabbanon. You want to do it l'Tzarech Mitzvah? A Shvus l'Tzarech Mitzvah is Mutter Ben Hashmashos. So the Lavush is Mekel. Now, according to the Lavush, we have a problem. Because I told you that really you're only allowed to make Eruvei Tchumin l'Tzarech Mitzvah. So if you're only allowed to make Eruvei Tchumin l'Tzarech Mitzvah, and the Lavush says, oh, you want to do it Ben Hashmashos, it's Mutter. So then when the Mechaber tells me that to make a Ruvei Tchumin, Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos is Aser, what is he talking about? He's talking about Shaloi L'Tzarech Mitzvah? But you're not allowed to make a Ruvei Tchumin even Erev Shabbos 11 o'clock in the morning if it's not L'Tzarech Mitzvah. So why do I have a Mishnah, and why do I have the Mechaber telling me you're not allowed to make a Ruvei Tchumin Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos? Of course, I don't understand. If it's L'Tzarech Mitzvah, the Lavush says you are allowed to. If it's not L'Tzarech Mitzvah, then you're not even allowed to do it Friday day. Why are you telling me that you can't do it Ben Hashmashos? It's mamish not negeya. So the Mishnah Berurah explains. He says like this: Ushtei dayas ha'elu nimtzam b'sefer me'iri. You could find both of these opinions. You could find the opinion of the Oila Shabbos, who says that it's Aser even L'Tzarech Mitzvah. You could also find the opinion of the Lavush, who says that it's Mutter L'Tzarech Mitzvah. You could find them both in the Me'iri. Ayin Sham Shekaisev Deladeya Hamutam Ateres. According to the Lavush, who says that the L'Tzarech Mitzvah it's Mutter, yeah, Ayriya Gemara the Oiser La'arev. Then you have to say that the Gemara that says that you're not allowed to make Eruvei Tchumin Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos must be taught even you're not allowed to do it Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. Dafka b'dvar harishus, he must be talking about a dvar harishus. Can't be talking about Tzarech Mitzvah. But again, the question is, if he's talking about a dvar harishus, you're not even allowed to do it at 11 o'clock in the morning. So why are you telling me you can't do it Ben Hashmashos? Oh, explains the Mishnah Berurah, uv'ma'arev beraglov. It's talking about a different type of a Ruvei Tchumin. I told you, how do you make a Ruvei Tchumin? Generally speaking, the way you make a Ruvei Tchumin is you go out to your Tchum, so you go, let's say, 2,000 amos beyond the city limits, you set up over there a place, Mazoin Shtei Seudais, you leave it over there, and now, at the beginning of Shabbos, it's as if you're kind of shvisa over there. That's your living spot at the beginning of Shabbos, even though you're not there, you're back at home. That's your living spot now at the beginning of Shabbos, and now you get an additional 2,000 amos from there. That's the traditional method of a Ruvei Tchumin. Normally when we speak about a Ruvei Tchumin, that's what we mean. But there's another way that you can accomplish a Ruvei Tchumin. You know how? Leave home on Erev Shabbos, go 2,000 amos away from the city limits, and stay there for Ben Hashmashos. Now, when Shabbos kicks in, you really are kind of shvisa over there, because that's where you are. And now you could go 2,000 amas back to the city, no problem. It's within the tchum. And you also get another 2,000 amas from the spot where you were when Shabbos came in. That's called being ma'arev beraglov, making an erev with your feet. Now, when you're ma'arev beraglov, says the Mishnah Berurah, the ba'alma mutar afilu l'dvar harishus. I told you that you're not allowed to make a ruvei tchumin unless it's a dvar mitzvah. That's true when you're using the traditional method of being ma'arev bepas. When you're making it a ruvei tchumin with mazon shtei seudais, putting it there before Shabbos, going back home and leaving it there, that you're only allowed to do for a dvar mitzvah. But if you're being ma'arev beraglov, if you're actually going to be located over there when Shabbos kicks in, that you're allowed to do even for a dvar rishus. So again, to wrap this up, very complicated, that we don't have a lot of time to go over it and over it. We're already 20 minutes into a long shir. But to wrap it up, when according to the Shita that says that you're allowed to make a ruvei tchumin erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes if it's for a dvar mitzvah, so then when the Gemara says that you're not allowed to make an ruvei tchumin on erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, he must mean for a dvar rishus. Question is, what do you mean? Even Friday day you're not allowed to make an ruvei tchumin for a dvar rishus. The answer is that's when you're being ma'arev bepas. But when you're being ma'arev beraglov, you are allowed to make it a ruvei tchumin for a dvar rishus. Comes along the Gemara and says, not erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, because it's too big of a tikkun, and there's a smach in the kra for the isser of tchum, therefore it's a significant tikkun, therefore it's also b'drabanan, and that isser kicks in even erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. Okay. So again, the Mishnah Berurah says over here, "Ubelavush mekel advar mitzvah shtei deyas elu nimsam sefer meiri ayin sham shekaisav deladei muteres." According to the Lavush, who says that for a dvar mitzvah it would be mutter. Yeah, Ariya Gemara the Oisel Arev said that when the Gemara says that it's also to make an ruvei tchumin erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes dafka b'dvar harishus, he's talking about doing it for something optional, not for a dvar mitzvah. That would always be also anyway, even Friday during the day. No, uva ma'arev beraglov. We're talking about somebody who's making it a ruvei tchumin by actually being out there when Shabbos kicks in. The ba'alma mutar afilu dvar rishus, which is normally mutar even for a dvar rishus. Kamash b'lan now, erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, it becomes aser. Ayin b'simin taf tesvav sif kat beis b'magen avram. The bepas, because if we're talking about the traditional ruvei tchumin with bread with mazon shtei sudais, hakarmelo dafilu min ba'ayin yomein ma'arvin el dvar mitzvah. Or kamash akasa b'simin taf tesvav sif aleph ad kan loshen ha meiri. Okay, then the Ramah put in over here in the parentheses, top line, limud beis, violently come on, siman tuf tesvav, sif beis, says the Mishnah Berurah is cut ches, violently come on, siman tuf tesvav, ritzayin lomar, the bavur sham, the b'di'eved, a ruvei erev, if somebody did make an ruvei tchumin erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, b'di'eved, that erev would still be efficacious. Vayin sham b'magen avram, sif cotton gimel. Okay, so those are things that the Mechaber told us you're not allowed to do erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. You're not allowed to be mafresh trumas and meises from tevel vadai. You're not allowed to be tovel kalim. You're not allowed to light neris. All of these things are things you're not allowed to do erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. The being mafresh meiser, doing tfilas kalim, those are isurei derabanan. Isurei derabanan, if it's not for a tzarech mitzvah, apply even erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, and we don't say safek derabanan lekula. Madlikin Saneris is Mamisha Daraisa, so that would be Safek Daraisa L'chumra. Of course you can't do that. Erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. You can't make a ruvei tchumin. There's a smach in the pasuk for the isser of tchum. It's a significant tikkun. It's an isser derabanan. That isser derabanan applies even erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. Now the Mechaber is going to tell me things that you are allowed to do erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes, and for each one we're going to have to understand why is this mutter. So let's see what the Mechaber says. Top line. Aval ma'asrin es ha-demai. You're allowed to separate meiser from demai. What's demai? The word demai is a contraction of two Aramaic words, da-mai, which means what is here. What this refers to is somebody goes ahead and buys produce from an Amoritz. He buys produce from somebody who doesn't know the halacha. Now, we have a suffix. When you buy produce from an Amoritz, we don't know for sure. Was he mafresh trumas ha'maisers, or was he not mafresh trumas ha'maisers? Really maisers, not truma. Truma, we assume he was mafresh. But maisers, we don't know for sure. Was he mafresh or was he not? So damai, what's here in front of us? Is this produce that we're allowed to eat because we can safely assume that the Ama Aretz was mafresh maisers? Or is it possible that he was not mafresh maisers? Now the Gemara says that this is not a real suffix. Really, we could safely assume that an Ama Aretz was mafresh maisers, because Roiv Amei Aretz ma'asrin hein. They found that the majority of Amei Aretz were mafresh maiser, and really lahalacha you had a right to be samech on that. Yet Chazal created a chumrah where they said that Demai, you have to be mafresh maisers. Now we're not going to go into all the halachas of Demai over here. This is not the time and place. But high level, that's the story with Demai. So Demai is really a suffix. Says the Mechaber, Aval ma'asrin es ha-Demai. If you have produce that's Demai, you have produce that you purchased from an Ama Aretz, that you're allowed to be mafresh maisers from Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. Why? Because it's not a real tikkun. Really, you should be able to eat this. Really, you should be able to assume that the Am Haaretz was mafresh maisers. So when you're mafresh to maiser, it's not a significant tikkun. Since it's not a significant tikkun, it's mutter erev Shabbos ben hashmoshes. Next, v'toimin es hachamin. Oh boy, we're going back to hatmana. You're allowed to insulate hot food on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashas. Of course, you have to do it in a way which is mutter, which means you have to use a davar she'ena ma'asev hevel. You have to be insulating it with coverings that don't generate and add heat to the food. All the halachas that we learned previously about hatmana, very complicated siman reish nun zayin. So you have to do it in an oifen shel heter, but you're allowed to do it Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashas. Why is it mutter? Because there's no room for the Issur D'Rabbanan of Hatmana. The Issur D'Rabbanan of Hatmana is, under certain circumstances, we don't allow you to insulate food on Erev Shabbos because we're afraid, on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't let you insulate food because we're afraid you're going to go to the food, you're going to find that it's colder than you want it to be, so you're going to stoke up the fire to rewarm your food. You're going to be over the Issur of Havara on Shabbos. But Ben Hashmoshes, Chazal said, there's no room for such a tikkun. Why? Because usually by Ben Hashmoshes, which is right before the beginning of Shabbos, at that point in time, your food is going to be hot. You cooked up your food right before Shabbos. The chances that you're going to find your food being colder than you expected it to be are very slim, and therefore the Chazal didn't make the gezerah against Hatmana during Ben Hashmoshes. So the Mechaber said, V'toimnin es hacham. Next, you're also allowed to make a ruve chatzeros Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. Why? We explained earlier. It's not considered a significant tikkun. The Isser of transferring from the Rishus HaYachid to the Chatzar, from the Chatzar to the Rishus HaYachid, is only an Isser D'Rabbanan, so we don't consider it to be a significant tikkun to make a ruve chatzeros, and therefore it's mutter Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. The Ramah says, V'ayin l'kamon, Siman Shin Tzadik Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois cotton tess. Es ha-demai. You're allowed to be mafresh meiser from demai. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, Deroiv amei aretz ma'asrin hein. Because really, we should be able to assume that the produce that you purchase from an amoritz is able to be eaten. It's already mesukin. Meisers were already taken from it. Because roiv amei aretz ma'asrin hein. V'loi mikri tikkun. So therefore, when you're mafresh meisers from demai, we don't consider it to be a significant tikkun, and that's why it's mutter. Ois cotton yud v'taimnin. You're allowed to do hatamana erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes. Of course, says the Chavetz Chaim, this means bedavar she'ena ma'asev hevel. You have to use insulating materials that don't generate and add heat. Kamosha kasa b'tchila siman reish nun zayin ayin sham shemavur kol prati adin b'ta'amein. We're not going now to do a whole chazara on the very complicated siman reish nun zayin. But when we say that you're allowed to do hatamana erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes, of course it has to be ba'ofen shel heter. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'l'sha'ar dvarim she'asu mid'Rabbanan chutz mei elu d'kachashiv boi. How about anything else that's also mid'Rabbanan to do on Shabbos? The Mechaber is telling me over here a few things that are mutter erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes, and they're not also mid'Rabbanan. But how about things that are normally also mid'Rabbanan to do on Shabbos? Are you allowed to transgress an Issur D'Rabbanan during the time period of Ben Hashmoshes on Erev Shabbos? Says the Mishnah Berurah, of course not. The Mishnah Berurah says, "U'sha'ar dvarim she'asim D'Rabbanan chutz me'elu d'kachashiv pai din Ben Hashmoshes k'may Shabbos atzma." The din of Ben Hashmoshes is mamish like Shabbos. Anything that's aser mid'Rabbanan on Shabbos itself is also Asur Midrabanan during the time period of Ben Hashmashas. We do not say Safik Darabanan Lekula, like I said at the beginning of this year, because when Chazal made Isurei Darabanan of Shabbos, what they did was they said, if it's a time period that we consider Shabbos, then all these Isurei Darabanan apply. And during the time period of Ben Hashmashas, we treat it like Shabbos. So all Isurei Darabanan apply. Im lo yishehu l'dvar mitzvah, unless you want to go against an Issa Darabanan for a tzarich mitzvah. If there's something that you want to do during the Ben Hashmashas period, which normally would be Asur Midrabanan, but you have a requirement to do it, you have a need to do it l'tzarich mitzvah, then it becomes mutter. Or certain other pressing circumstances, the Chamavur l'kaman b'simin shin membeis ayin sham. Ois katan yod aleph. And the Mechaber said you're allowed to make a ruva chatzeros, uma arvin, v'yochel gam ken levarech. There's a bracha that you make when you make a ruva chatzeros. You want to make a ruva chatzeros on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, you're allowed to, and you even make a bracha. V'ayin b'sif dalit, u'b'mashe kasavnu sham. Umikamakim, nevertheless, lechatchila yizar shalo ya'acher ha'ruva chatzeros on Ben Hashmashos. Lechatchila, don't push off making the ruva chatzeros until Ben Hashmashos. Lechatchila, you should make it earlier. Now, the Ramah said over here, Ayin l'kamon Siman Shin Sad Gimel, says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu de Shetufe Mavuais Reish Leidina Ruva Chatzeros V'Oid Prote Dinim Ayin Sham. There's another very similar din to a Ruva Chatzeros, which is Shetufe Mavuais. Again, we're going to do this very, very high level. The way the streets were set up in those days were, you had a lot of different houses that opened up onto a common courtyard. Then you had a lot of these courtyards that opened up, each one, they all opened up onto a mavui, like a central alleyway or a central street, if you will. So the same way Chazal made a takana, and they said you're not allowed to transfer from the houses in a chutzner to the chutzner, or from the chutzner to the houses. Why? Because it looks like you're going from the house, which is a Rishus HaYachid, to the common courtyard that feels like a Rishus HaRabim, even though really it's a Rishus HaYachid. And to be matter that, you have to make it a Ruva Chatzeros. We have a similar problem by the Mavui, by the central alleyway that leads to all the different Chatzerim. Over there, it feels like the Chatzerim, each individual Chatzer, that's a Rishus HaYachid. But the common alleyway that serves all these different Chatzeros, that feels a lot more like a Rishus HaRabim. So if we're going to allow you to transfer from the Chatzerim to the Mavui, again, you might come to transfer from a bona fide Rishus HaYachid to a bona fide Rishus HaRabim. What do you have to do in order to make this mutter? You have to make Shetufei Mavuos. Everybody, the different Chatzerim have to get together. They have to make a partnership in some food. They have to put it in one of the Chatzerim. And now we look at it that the Mavui is serving one unified group instead of individual groups. And now that transfer becomes mutter. So the same halacha that applies over here, that you're allowed to make a Ruva Chatzeros Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, you're also allowed to make Shetufei Mavuos Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. Okay. Now we move on to another halacha. Second line down, middle of the line here on Lamed Beis, Lamed Beis. Another thing that becomes mutter on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. Mutter loymar le'enu Yehudi Ben Hashmashos lahadlik ner l'tzarich Shabbos. Amir la'akum is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Okay, we said that Isurei D'Rabbanan generally do apply on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. Yet, says the Mechaber, if you want to ask an Eini Yehudi to go light a fire, so that's an Issa D'Rabbanan, Amir la'akum, you're allowed to do that l'tzarich Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Yud Dalet, Ben Hashmashos, HaMechaber Ozal L'Shitasai, I'm sorry, Ois Katan Yud Gimel. Loymar le'eni Yehudi. You're allowed to do Amir la'akum, even on a Daraisa, so it's a single D'Rabbanan, it's a Shvus. You're allowed to do Amir la'akum Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos if it's l'tzarich Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Yud Gimel, Loymar le'eni Yehudi, da Amir le'eni Yehudi hu b'chlal Shvus. Remember, Amir la'akum is an Issa D'Rabbanan. V'loy gazra Shvus Ben Hashmashos l'tzarich mitzvah. Over here, you want to do Amir la'akum to ask an Eini Yehudi to light a fire, that's an Issa D'Rabbanan. But it's l'tzarich Shabbos, so it's l'tzarich mitzvah. Since it's a tzarich mitzvah, even though it's an Issa D'Rabbanan and Isurei D'Rabbanan do kick in during Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos, but over here it's l'tzarich mitzvah, it doesn't kick in. Ukid lakaman b'simin shin men beis ayin sham. Now, the Mechaber said you're allowed to do this bein hashmashas. Ois cut yodal bein hashmashas. HaMechaber also l'shitasai d'sfir leile kamam b'simin shin zayin sifhei de b'shabes gufa aser al yedei ein Yehudi b'malacha da'araisa afilu imhu l'tzar Shabbos v'ar l'kamam b'simin reish ayin vav sif beis b'hago. What the Mishnah Berurah just said is the Mechaber. There's a big machlokes that we're going to have later on in Siman Shin Zayin. The Mechaber holds that Amira la'akum is osir to ask an Ein Yehudi to do an Isser Da'araisa if it's L'tzorich Mitzvah is osir on Shabbos itself. It's mutter ben hashmoshes, but on Shabbos itself it's osir. There are those that hold that Amir L'Akum for a Tzorich Mitzvah is mutter on Shabbos, not the Mechaber. The Mechaber holds it's osir on Shabbos, but he's telling you here it's mutter Erev Shabbos bein hashmoshes. Ois cotton tezvav. If it's, no, we got to go weiter in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber 3 lines down. V'chein loimer loy lasais kol malacha shehi l'tzarech mitzvah. The Mechaber just told you, you're allowed to ask an Ein Yehudi, Erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes, to do hadlakas neiros, to light an air. That's the Isser of Havara. It's an Isser Daraisa. Says the Mechaber now, V'chein loimer loy lasais kol malacha shehi l'tzarech mitzvah. Likewise, you can ask an Ein Yehudi, Erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes, to do any malacha as long as it's a tzarech mitzvah, because it's a mir l'akum, it's a shvus, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, ben Hashmoshes, l'tzarech mitzvah. It's mutter. Oy shehu tarid v'nechpaz aleha. This is a new heter. The first heter the Mechaber gave was Amir la'akum Erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes l'tzarech mitzvah. Now he's telling you, you know what else is mutter? Amir la'akum Erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes when shehu tarid v'nechpaz aleha. If there's something that you forgot to do, and it's something that you're going to be upset about all Shabbos, even if it's not a tzarech mitzvah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example in my mind right now. There was a light that you forgot to left on. It's not a tzarech mitzvah. You don't need the light on for a tzarech mitzvah. Or you forgot to turn something off, or whatever it is. But there's something that you forgot to do. And now, if you don't get it done, it's going to be sitting on your mind all Shabbos. But it's not a tzarech mitzvah. It's not even a tzarech Shabbos. It might have something to do with your business. But it's something that you can't do anymore because it's an Isser Malacha. It's already Erev Shabbos ben Hashmoshes, so you're not allowed to do it. You wanted to do it Erev Shabbos. Oh, I forgot. I can't believe it. And now you're going to be upset and it's going to be on your mind all Shabbos long. You can ask an Ein Yehudi to do it for you. Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Tezayin. Ois Cotton Tezvav. L'tzarech mitzvah. First, the Mechaber said, you could do Amir la'akum on any malacha if it's a tzarech mitzvah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Av she'einena b'shvil Shabbos. It's a tzarech mitzvah, but not necessarily a tzarech Shabbos. It's still mutter. Ukil b'simin shin men beis, ayin cham uve Mishnah Berurah. Now he's cutting tezayin, or a new heter, anything that's going to make you very upset. V'nechpaz aleha. Kasa Marshal, the Marshal writes, Hainu kol davar shem lo yia nasahu mitztar b'Shabbos. Anything that if it doesn't get done, it's going to be sitting on your head, and it's going to be upsetting you on Shabbos. Shari lasis al yidei Ein Yehudi ben Hashmoshes. You could do Amir Lakim. You could ask an Ein Yehudi to do it for you during the time period of ben Hashmoshes. However, says the Marshal, avalibi noikif lahachmir im ein loy behen shum tzarech Shabbos rak l'tzarech chayil. But the Marshal says, if there's no tzarech Shabbos at all, if it's completely a tzarech chayil, something to do with your business or something else, has nothing to do with Shabbos, just it's going to be sitting on your head and it's going to be mitzvah you, the Marshal says he would like to be machmer. Achimu hefsid merubah, but if it's something that's going to cause a hefsid merubah, I don't know, you have a lot of inventory, you're in the meat business, and you have a lot of inventory in a refrigerator, and you forgot to set the temperature properly, and now it's already ben hashmoshes on Erev Shabbos. So you can't turn down the thermostat anymore. You want to ask an Ein Yehudi to do it. It's not a tzarech mitzvah, it's not a tzarech Shabbos, but it's a hefsid merubah. If you don't do it, you might lose all your meat, and you're very upset about it. So then, Achim Hefsid Meruba, Oil Tzarech Godel, Shari Shvusin Beven Hashmashas, then an Isid Rabbanon is Mutter Ben Hashmashas. Ubeprat Shvusta Amir La'eni Yehudi. Certainly, when it comes to the Isid Rabbanon of Amir La'akum, the Lesbe Maisa, where the Yisrael is not doing anything, he's just Dibur Ba'alma. He's just asking an Eni Yehudi to do something, but he's not doing a Maisa. Valkain therefore says to Mishnah Berurah, Mutter Loimar La'eni Yehudi Ben Hashmashas Lahavlik Ner Yardzeit. Very interesting. Somebody has Yardzeit on Shabbos. He wants to light a Yardzeit licht. He forgot to light the Yardzeit licht, and now it's already after Shkia, it's Ben Hashmashas. He's all upset. He forgot to light a Yardzeit licht for his parents' Yardzeit. So he's all upset about it. Is this a tzarech mitzvah? No. There's no mitzvah to light a Yardzeit licht. Is it a tzarech Shabbos? No. You don't need the Yardzeit licht on for Shabbos. So it's not a tzarech Shabbos, it's not a tzarech mitzvah, but what is it? It's mitzvah. It's tarid v'nechbaz aleh. He's going to be all upset about it. All Shabbos long, he's going to be looking at that unlit Yardzeit licht, and he's going to be all upset. I can't believe I forgot to light a Yardzeit licht on my father's Yardzeit. So you're allowed to go ask it, Ein Yehudi, to do it. Erev Shabbos ben Hashmashas. V'alkein mutar l'omer Ein Yehudi ben Hashmashas l'adlich the Yardzeit mayacher sha'olam nizarin by. Since the Welt is very, very careful about lighting a Yardzeit licht, chashvin on kol tzarech gadol. We consider it tzarech gadol. Ad kan l'shoinoi bekitzer. Okay, now we're running late in the shir, but we got to do what we got to do. Now we have another halacha here. We have a little bit of a complex Ramah. So before we go into the Ramah, let me give you just a brief hakdama so that we can understand the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah better. We all know about this phenomenon of making Shabbos early. Right now, we're learning this during the end. It's at the end of the summer months. People are still making Shabbos early. How do you make Shabbos early? Okay, you daven mincha before plag, and then you're going to daven Ma'ariv after plag. So normally we don't daven Ma'ariv until after Tzeis HaKechavim, but you're going to daven Ma'ariv mincha before plag, Ma'ariv after plag, so we don't consider it tarti desasri. We don't consider it that you're doing two things that contradict each other. How could you be davening mincha and Ma'ariv during the same time period? Is it day and you're davening mincha, or is it night and you're davening Ma'ariv? The answer is we're going to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, even though normally you don't follow Shitas Rabbi Yehuda in this case. But on Erev Shabbos you're going to follow Shitas Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara in Brachas, and you're going to say that you could say Kriya Shema after Plag HaMincha, you could daven Ma'ariv after Plag HaMincha. So you're davening mincha before Plag during the day, you're davening Ma'ariv after Plag, and you're calling that night, and now you're going to be Makabel Shabbos after Plag. Are you allowed to be Makabel Shabbos before Plag HaMincha? What happens if 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Erev Shabbos you say, I'm being Makabel Shabbos? No. You can't be Makabel Shabbos 2 o'clock in the afternoon Friday. It's Erev Shabbos. It's not Shabbos. You decided you want to be Makabel Shabbos. Sorry. Just announcing I want to be Makabel Shabbos doesn't turn Friday into Shabbos. So no, you can't be Makabel Shabbos 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday afternoon. But you could be Makabel Shabbos after Plag HaMincha. Once you reach the Zman of Plag HaMincha, now you could be Makabel Shabbos. What's the status of that Kabbalah Shabbos? So the truth is, we're going to see that when you're Makabel Shabbos right after Plag, yes, it's Shabbos for you. You're not allowed to do any Yisuri D'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to do any Yisuri D'Oraisa, for sure not. It's Shabbos. You're Makabel Shabbos. It's Shabbos. But really, if Chas v'Chalila, if somebody did some Chilul Shabbos at that point, it would be an Yisur D'Rabbanan. It wouldn't be an Yisur D'Oraisa. It doesn't become an Yisur D'Oraisa until later. It becomes an Yisur D'Oraisa once you come to Shkia, for sure. You're going to start dealing with D'Oraisis if you're Makabel Shabbos. But you could be Makabel Shabbos already after Plag HaMincha. Now, the Ramah is going to talk over here about the case we've been dealing until now. What's the status when it comes to Isurei Shabbos? What's the status of the time period of Ben Hashmashas? Ben Hashmashas is Safek Yom, Safek Laila. So we're seeing Isurei D'Rabbanan all kick in during Ben Hashmashas. You're not allowed to do Isurei D'Rabbanan during the time period of Ben Hashmashas. We have certain exceptions over here, certain things that you are allowed to do. We see that you're allowed to do an Issur D'Rabbanan if it's L'tzarech Shabbos, L'tzarech Mitzvah. How about if you're Makabel Shabbos early? If you make Shabbos early, what's the halacha then? So it says the Ramah like this. The Ramah says, Hago, V'chein mi shekibel olav Shabbos, shah oy shtayim koydem chashecha. If somebody's Makabel Shabbos an hour or two before Tzeis HaKechavim, That's what Chashecha means. If someone's Makabel Shabbos an hour or two before Tzeis HaKechavim. Now, the Biur Halacha says over here right away that there's a problem here. Because the Ramah says Shah Shtayim. Now, 2 hours before Tzeis HaKechavim is before Plag. And you can't be Makabel Shabbos before Plag. If you try to be Makabel Shabbos before Plag, it doesn't mean anything. So the Biur Halacha says over here, he says this is a problem. That we can't really deal with this 2 hours before Chashecha. But an hour before Chashecha, 60 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim, 60 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim, you definitely could be Makabel Shabbos. And if you're Makabel Shabbos 60 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim, now it's Shabbos Daraisa for you. So you're talking about a real bona fide Kabbalah Shabbos over here. So the Ramah says like this, V'chein, Mi shekibel olav Shabbos shah shtayim kodem b'chashecha. We're going to focus on the shah, on the 1 hour, not the shtayim. Somebody was Makabel Shabbos an hour before Tzeis HaKechavim. Yachal loymar le'en Yehudli lahad lekaner. He could do Amir Lakum. Amir Lakum, you were Makabel Shabbos an hour early, you were Makabel Shabbos an hour before Tzeis HaKechavim. It's not really an hour early. Because an hour before Tzeis, 60 minutes before Tzeis, let's remember that the Ramah over here, everything that we've been talking about when it comes to Zmanim, we're talking about the world of Rabbeinu Tam. Now in the world of Rabbeinu Tam, Tzeis HaKechavim is 72 minutes after what we call Shkia. Remember, 72 minutes after what the Rabbeinu Tam calls Tchilas Shkia. That's our Shkia, sunset. According to the Rabbeinu Tam, the way this works is, you have Tchilas Shkia, 58.5 minutes later is Sof Shkia. 13.5 minutes after that is Tzeis HaKechavim. So Tzeis HaKechavim is 72 minutes after Shkia. Now, if somebody was Makabel Shabbos an hour before Tzeis HaKechavim, 60 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim, that's after Shkia. So this is a bona fide Kabbalah Shabbos. So for this person, it's Mamish Shabbos. Yet the Ramah says, even though for this person it's Mamish Shabbos, v'chein mi shekibel olav Shabbos shah shtayim kodem b'chashecha, yachal loymar le'en Yehudi lahad lekaner. He could do a Amir Lakum on a Daraisa. He could ask an Yehudi to light a fire, ushar dvarim shetzarech, or anything else that he needs done. There's no Amir Lakum for this person. He was Makabel Shabbos an hour early. There's no Amir Lakum. He could do Amir Lakum for and it doesn't even say over here L'tzarech Mitzvah. Anything that he needs done, he could go ahead and he could do Amir Lakum. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut Yud Zayim Shah Shtayim. So first the Chavetz Chaim says like this: realize Dafka Shah Shtayim. We're talking about somebody who was Makabel Shabbos early, meaning at least 60 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim. That's when he was Makabel Shabbos. Aval Chatzi Shah Samach L'Chashecha. But within a half an hour of Tzeis HaKechavim, Da'oz Efshir the Bechom Kamis Yisrael Kibulu Alei on Shabbos, where it makes sense that already at that point, everybody was Makabel Shabbos. Remember, a half hour before Tzeis HaKechavim, according to Rabbeinu Tam, a half hour before Tzeis HaKechavim, 13.5 minutes before Tzeis HaKechavim is already Ben Hashmashos. That's already the beginning of Ben Hashmashos. So what? You were Makabel Shabbos 15, 18 minutes before that? That's already within the time period of Tzeis Shabbos. So during that time, a half an hour before Tzeis HaKechavim, most of the world was already probably Makabel Shabbos. And therefore, that time period, Chamir Tvei, we have to treat that more stringently. Over there, Amir La'akum would be Aser. Now, we need a little bit of background over here. What exactly is this heter that the Ramah is talking about over here? The Ramah is saying, if you make Shabbos early, an hour before Tzeis HaKechavim, there's no Amir La'akum, why not? He's basing this on a Ma'arivail. There's a very interesting Ma'arivail. The Ma'arivail says, if you make Shabbos early, that means that you're making Shabbos before most of the world already made Shabbos. How chamur are we going to make that time period? For most people, it's not even Shabbos yet. You voluntarily went ahead and took on Shabbos. Says the Ma'arivail, we're not going to be more machmir during that time period than we're machmir on Ben Hashmashos. So says the Ma'arivail, we're not going to aser Amir La'akum during this time period when you voluntarily took on Shabbos. That's why the Mishnah Berurah says over here, this halacha is only somebody who took on Shabbos during a time period where most of the world didn't yet take on Shabbos, and his taking on Shabbos is really voluntary. But if you took on Shabbos a half an hour before Tzeitzei Kechavim, most people already were Makabel Shabbos. We're not going to give you this heter of the Mahari Vial during that time. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here. When the Ramah says, somebody who took on Shabbos early, an hour before Chashecha, Dafka Shah Ishtayim, of a Chatzi Shah Samach LeChashecha, if you're within a half an hour of Tzeitzei Kechavim, which in the world of Rabbeinu Tam means that you're only about 15 minutes before Ben Hashmashas. If you take on Shabbos at that time, where now it makes sense that most kehillas, most people were already Makabel Shabbos, Chamir Tvei. That time period is more chamer. We're not going to give you the heter of the Maharivayel. During that time, Amir La'akum would be aser. Miu l'tzarch mitzvah, shari. But l'tzarch mitzvah, it would be mutter. Because shvus, Amir La'akum, l'tzarch mitzvah, is mutter even ben hashmashas. Even according to what we're going to see later, where the Mechaber is going to say, the Mechaber is going to tell us that once you're Mekabel Shabbos, an Issa D'Rabbanan, even L'Tzarech Mitzvah becomes Aser. Mikamokim l'Inyan Amir l'Eini Yehudi, but not Amir l'Akum. Over there, remember what was said already many times. Amir la'akum is an Issa D'Rabbanan, but it's a little bit of a shvachara Issa D'Rabbanan. It's a little bit of a weaker Issa D'Rabbanan. Why? Because it's an Issa D'Rabbanan she'ain by Maisa. You're not doing anything. It's only dibur. You're only talking. The Maisa is being done by the Eini Yehudi. Therefore, it's a little bit of a weaker Issa D'Rabbanan. So even according to the Mechaber, who says that once you're Makabel Shabbos, even though it's early, even in Issa D'Rabbanan you're not allowed to do, but by the Issa D'Rabbanan of Amir La'akum, we are Mekel. Ois Katan Yudches, the Ramah said, Loimer Le'eni Yehudi Lahadlik. You made Shabbos an hour early, you're even allowed to ask an Eini Yehudi to do a Malacha Daraisa, of Hadlaka, of Havara. Afilu Shalom Makam Mitzvah, says the Mishnah Berurah. Why? The Kevan She'oid HaYom Gadol, because since it's really still Erev Shabbos, Bevada Yesh B'Kayim Shadayin Lo Kiblala in Shabbos, V'Oisin Ba'atzman Malacha. There are plenty of people out there who aren't Makabel Shabbos yet. You chose to make Shabbos early. But there's plenty of Yidden around who aren't Makabel Shabbos yet. Therefore, you have the heter of the Mahari Vayel. Since you were an Oisnam, and you were Makabel Shabbos, we don't have to be so machmer on you. It's enough that you don't do malacha. But Amir La'akum, that becomes mutter. You made Shabbos early, so you can't do malacha. But Amir La'akum is still mutter. Vedan, you should know. To be in Yonenu, over here in Reish Samachai Aleph, Siman Aleph, in this Ramah, what are we talking about? Irinon Shatzibur Shebe'iroi Kiblu Alei on Shabbos. We're talking about where your kehillah, it's not you as a yochid, your kehillah, your shul, was Makabel Shabbos, and therefore v'chal kedusha Shabbos bal karchai afilu imechad lo yirtze lekabel. Your city was already Makabel Shabbos. Your city made Shabbos early. That's when we have this diun that we're talking over here, where we're saying that Amir La'akum is mutter because you made Shabbos early. But when we're talking about a single yachid who made Shabbos early, then there's no Amir Yisrael. If you made Shabbos early personally, guess what? You don't have to look for a guy to turn on your lights. You could ask another Yehudi. You could ask a Yisrael who didn't make early Shabbos. You could ask him to turn on the lights. Okay? There was a lot of complex topics in this share, and that's why we went a little bit over. I tried to get through it in a concise, as concise a time frame as I could. I hope it was a little clear. Thank you for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussion of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should say Yeshua's refuahs panasit shadupim to all those in need. We should be zeicha to the biaskel tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.